all the link challenges you had. Therefore, we are delighted to have you on this day 4. Please join and welcoming our coach, Dr. Job Mogire, the heart surgeon and our lead for this session. Let's applaud as we welcome Dr. Job Mogire.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me loud and clear? Thank you, Gladys.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Gladys, for getting started. I will go straight into sharing what we will focus on today, this is going to be a continuation. I hope you've had time to read this passage. So that we do not presume, because this is the foundation. The return journey is grounded on this passage. And I want us to still continue looking at the first part of this passage. When he came to his senses. The question is, what is so different about the circumstances, the emotional place where he came to his senses? He had his senses all along, but he was too busy moving. He had no stillness until it was forced on him by circumstances. When it was forced on him by circumstances, then he had to stop. He was on the move the entire time. From the moment he asked for his half of his inheritance, of his father's wealth, his share of the inheritance, the moment he left for the far country, when he was squandering the money, when he ran out of the money, even when he was in need, when he ran out of money in a far country that had a famine, he was still too busy to come to his senses. He was busy hiring himself out, being sent to feed the pigs. And he continued feeding the pigs until he could not get even what the pigs were eating. And that is the unfortunate reality, that sometimes our needs force us to come to our senses, but it can take a long time before that happens. We say it that unmet needs don't disappear. They take over. His need for a new mindset, a new life, a return became undeniable when everything was stripped away from him. I pray that I don't have to make that change in direction only when everything has been stripped, that I can begin to build enough stillness to reduce the external noise and look for the signal that guides me on the return journey that I am designed to take. Every need gets met. The question is not if. The question is how. And over the last 2 days, you've been looking at these questions. What pattern? What pattern keeps repeating? That pattern is an expression of an approach to meet a need. What pattern and what need is it trying to meet? The reason the pattern keeps repeating is because there is tension between two ideas. There is relief and satisfaction. There is a tension between two concepts, relief and satisfaction. The reason why that pattern keeps repeating is because the pattern is trying to meet a need through relief. So it quiets the discomfort that you feel. It stabilizes. It doesn't stabilize, rather, it quiets the discomfort. It is immediate, it quiets the comfort, but then it fades. And what you need is something totally different, which is satisfying the need. Truly meeting the need. Satisfaction stabilizes the need. It leaves you with lasting satisfaction of that need. It makes you settled. And that's why it's so important for us to become aware that everything we seek in life comes down to needs. The goals you set, the decisions you make, the conversations you engage in, the conversations you avoid, the risks you take, the risks you avoid, they are all anchored on you meeting your needs. And you meet your needs in two ways. You meet your needs through aversion, in other words, you avoid the discomfort, or through craving, in other words, desiring. Now, I use those words because they are almost on the extreme. The easier way to talk about those words is pain and pleasure. Pain and pleasure. We will do more to avoid feeling pain than we would do to gain pleasure. If I was trying to take away 100 shillings from you, you will probably fight me more than if I told you I will give you 100 shillings tomorrow. The 100 shillings that I will give you doesn't feel immediate, but the one you have in hand, it feels more immediate, more compelling. We do more to avoid feeling pain than we do to experience pleasure. Our needs are the hidden driver of almost everything that you do. You have authentic emotional needs. You can feed them noodles or real food. The noodles are the false substitutes. They help you preserve a sense of control. They help you create space so that you don't feel vulnerable. They help you keep on, even if you're keeping on fumes, but they keep you going on. They do not satisfy the need. And you will know that you are truly meeting a need through one of the words that I am intent on focusing this year, the word capacity. Capacity. And capacity here can be defined in many ways, but how I'm looking at capacity this year, particularly capacity to meet my needs, is the capacity of how much I can hold without compensating, without starting to perform, without starting to resist, without starting to explain how much. In other words, one of the ingredients is emotional range. How much emotional experience can I have without being fully absorbed in perception and be able to step back into perspective? When you meet your need, truly meet it, it builds your capacity. It creates room where you continue to serve, but you also receive. You continue to serve and you also receive because only the perspective, only the actor can receive. The character is too busy performing. When they cast movies, the character plays the movie, the actor gets the payment. The benefit, the reflection, the learning, the integration that happens at the level of actor. The character's role is to prove that they are worthy, because the character doesn't believe that they are worthy. The character believes they need to earn worth. Only the actor knows. So that if Idris Elba plays Mandela and you write a check to Mandela, Idris will not receive it because you're writing a check to the character. But the payment needs to go to the character, to the actor. The actor is the one whose capacity, and that's the beauty about it, that you are developing the capacity of the character to express more of the actor. Because within, I have the capacity to carry more, to experience more without compensating, explaining, defending. But the characters I have, some of them are so vulnerable. If you have in your life, there is a character that is an achiever. That character defines themselves based on how well they perform. When you meet your true needs, truly it restores wholeness. In other words, it begins to minimize the space between the character and the actor, between perception and perspective, such that even in intense emotional experiences, you are still able to maintain perspective and remember, even these will pass. Even when you are in a heated argument, You remember that this argument will pass. In that moment, you remember that relationships always outlast situations. Even when the situation feels like this is a make or break, the relationship will always outlast the situation. That is why if you meet two married people fighting, remember, the fight will be outlasted by the relationship. So if you join them and join sides during the fight, you are going to be one of their enemies, because the fight will end. And when the fight ends, they remember where you stood, whether you stood with the situation or you stood with the relationship. So that you find ways to stand with the relationship. But that's from perspective, that's from the actor. That's from having a bigger time frame than those 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or even 24 hours during which a conflict is brewing. That brings us back to the questions. What pattern keeps repeating? What need are you trying to meet? You are keeping repeating it because you are trying to relieve the discomfort or the pain you are trying to relieve. In other words, the pattern keeps repeating for as long as you continue to relieve rather than to satisfy. The pathway out is development of capacity. One of the most powerful elements of capacity is capacity for stillness, because in stillness, you are able to step back. Now, you can develop stillness intentionally, or you can develop stillness in the pig pen, because you have been so busy asking for your wealth, for your inheritance, and traveling to a far country and squandering it in a far country, hiring yourself out to a local of that country and feeding the pigs until finally you come to the point where you actually name what is going on. And this young man came to the point where he named what was going on. Verse 17 says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants? How many of the characters in my father's house are in a better place than the actor in me? How many of my father's servants have food to spare? In other words, they are not just relieving hunger. They are satisfied. They have food, not just food to eat and spare. And that is the power of satisfaction, where you go beyond just meeting the need to truly developing, being able to carry more. How many have food to spare? And then he comes to the reality. The pattern in his life at that time is, and here I am starving. As far as I can tell, he's been starving from the word go. He's been starving from the word go. He was starving for real fulfillment of his needs, but he used money to try and do it. He used pleasure. He used travel. He used business. He used activity until he came to his rock bottom in the pig pen, where he asks, how many of my father's servants have food, not just enough to relieve hunger, but to satisfy? And here I am starving. Those two couldn't be any more different. If they couldn't be any more different, and then he said, I will set out and go back. I will set out and go back. What changes? What changes here is he is no longer trying to use the same strategy, the repeating strategy that has not worked. He is going back to where the need can be satisfied rather than relieved. At the point when he is desiring to eat the pot the pigs were eating, he's not trying to satisfy the hunger. He is just trying to relieve the discomfort that he has at that moment. And my freedom, your freedom, lies in going back to the only place where the need can be satisfied. To develop the capacity Because once we develop the capacity, then we can delink ourselves from being totally distracted by the discomfort and look behind the discomfort. We did an experiment yesterday where I asked you to hold your breath to the count of 10. Once the hunger to breathe becomes intense enough, it takes over. It doesn't matter what your IQ is. It doesn't matter your position. It doesn't matter how you're dressed. It doesn't matter whether you have makeup on or you don't. It doesn't matter. All those things become irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether you are on live stream or you are private. It does not matter. At that time, an unfulfilled need takes over. An unfulfilled need at that moment takes over. And unfortunately, sometimes a need takes over. It creates a pattern, and that pattern repeats itself in my life or in your life for decades. The power of return is the opportunity to reflect before we get to the pig pen, how we can come back to our senses in the areas where the strongest, most impactful patterns keep repeating themselves. And then I want you to pay attention to these 3 questions. This is what we will focus on today. You will continue working on these previous questions at the end of this session. And we go back to these 3 questions. When you did this reflection exercise the last 2 days, what did you see? What did you see? The pattern that is costing you, the pattern I hope you saw, the pattern that has been repeating, what is it costing you? And when it comes to creating a totally new reality over the next 5 years, what do you want? Let's go to the chat box. And I just want to see a yes or no or almost. If you haven't identified any repeating pattern, that is by itself a big step that you have already taken if you have searched. Have you identified a pattern that has been repeating? It's yes, you have, no, you haven't, almost, which means you have some inklings. And if you say almost, I would like you to type in a number of potential candidates. Because if you have almost and it's 0, then you are no. Yes, so let me look at your responses. Okay, I see your responses. Today, I want us to look specifically only at certainty. I want us to look specifically at certainty. Where is that slide? I just want us to look specifically at certainty. All right, we will have to use the slide at the bottom. Okay, this one here. All right. So I want you to just focus on certainty. These are patterns. These are not identities. And I want you to just hear which of those ones, the pattern that you caught, which of those seem like the most likely, just on the column of certainty. Is it anxious achiever? Is it anxious achiever? Anxious achiever is trying to achieve as a way to cover or to compensate for a perception of lack of total worthiness. These are not identities, these are patterns, I have to insist. Identity, is it rigid role playing? I don't know. Beliefs, is it catastrophic thinking or automatic, almost an automatic inclination towards seeing more of the negative side than the positive side? Is it competence perfectionist? In other words, you want to develop this one skill, but you want to refine it so much, you have no room to learn other things that you need to do along the way. For example, if you start a business, you just need to realize that you have created for yourself 20 different bosses. When you're employed, you have one boss. When you start a business, you have 40 different bosses. Every customer is a boss. You are the HR, you are the head of hiring, you are the head of recruitment, you are the head of training, you are finance, you are auditing, you are public relations, you are conflict resolution, you are the disciplinary committee. Sometimes the entity to be disciplined is yourself. Such that if you are a competence perfectionist in your business, you will be amazing at writing blog posts, but you've not touched HR. You've not touched legal. You've not touched customer communication. Because running a business is the single most challenging and personally expanding thing you will ever do. It requires you to expand. And if you're a competence perfectionist, you'll be caught. Are you a compulsive controller? Which means even if you have a team, maybe you're a manager or you in your family, you have children, everything must go the way. If that sheet on the table was not spread with the balanced corners, there's a problem in this house. I struggled with this. And I didn't realize the extent to which I have a tendency to want to control things until I became a medical resident in a foreign country where I am overseeing people who it's and I'm trying people in a different culture, and I'm trying to get things to work the same way. This pattern sometimes looks like it controls the external, but actually when you set your inner goals, if this is one of your patterns, you are going to try to control every step for everything to be so organized in the way that you want it. And there is nothing more draining than the constant need for control. And this is not, oh, I am choosing to control. No, compulsive controller. It's not that you choose it. It's automatically preset. It's software that is programmed, that runs almost automatically. And finally, the comfort zone prisoner. I don't know which of these apply to you. I don't want you to look at all the rest. The goal is not to look at all these 36 patterns. The goal is to identify 2 or 3 that are the strongest, and that's why we are doing this. So among these 6 under certainty, the anxious achiever, the rigid role player, the catastrophic thinker, the competence perfectionist, the compulsive control, and the comfort zone, does any of them come close to any that probably might be asserting the most impact on your journey? Whichever that is, you have all the 6 as you go into today's exercise. I would like you to reflect around this. And then tomorrow we will wrap this up. And I pray that for most of you, because the majority of you are attending this 5-day return challenge, not the first time, at least the second time, that this adds a layer onto what we've already covered together. And I will end it there and hand over back to Gladys. In your reflection today, this is what you are going to focus on. If I'm seeing somebody say that they are still reviewing, I can give you the text for all these 6 in the chat box, so that you have it in the chat box. I will paste it after this back to Gladys.
Thank you, Dr. Wow. I don't know how I'm feeling, so I'm sure you're also feeling something. Before you type your reflection, please type how are you feeling so that we know you're here. And then remember, we are just finishing the lesson, but the reflection chat is on so that you can be able to reflect and type and then leave by the chat will be on by 6 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. Anyone with a quick comment before we wrap up? Burning comment? I want to single out Donna, who is joining for the first time. Donna, how are you feeling? Donna? Okay. You will be able to watch the videos, Donna, for the previous ones. So let us know if you have any questions. That's it.